What traumatized you so badly it changed your way of living? Waking up to my second story apartment on fire. That was 2 years ago, and I haven't slept a full night since. Also, my animals always sleep in my room now. Someone leaving me a voicemail before they said goodbye forever. I must have replayed that message over 100 times and I have never looked at any of my friends the same since. I tell people I will always look at them under a microscope when it comes to their mental health, because I feel like I can't afford not to anymore. Finding out at 15 that my suspicion of being adopted really was true, which explained why my sister was on a pedestal and they raised me like they were Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. I found out that my uncle was really my bio dad, who put me up for adoption, but kept literally all of his other kids. And my cousin was really my older brother who had passed away 3 days before I found all this out. Mom and dad were really aunt and uncle and they were reluctant to adopt me in the first place. I was, to them, a literal physical embodiment of mistake they couldn't go back on. My wife having an affair with an ex shortly after I spent my savings on a house for us. Lost a wife, stepson, pets, house, money and my secondary job all in one day was over 2 years ago, and I still have so many unchecked feelings towards it. Disrupted my concentration at my main job and gave me severe depression. I struggle daily to find inner peace to move on, but it feels hopeless, and I just wanted to clarify about losing the house and stepson and such. These weren't lost in the sense of a court battle or agreement. However, I meant it in the way of no longer having the close relationship with my stepson, and the house we ended up selling for slightly under what we bought it for as neither could afford it alone. I mentioned in another comment in hindsight I may have rented it out, but in the midst of it, I just wanted to get out. Growing up with parents who resented each other and fought constantly, but refused to divorce, has made me incapable of feeling anything but petrified and suffocated by relationships. When I was in first grade I liked a boy in my class. We were great friends for most of that year. He became sick and passed away before the school year ended. Broke my heart, and I really didn't understand it. Then when I was in second grade there was a boy and his sister that I became good friend with. He and his sister were hit by a drunk driver one weekend and they both died. So after losing my best friends in only a couple of years I really became a loner. I've never really made good friendships with anyone since then, so afraid of losing them. I'm now in my 60s and quite happy being by myself. And for people asking, I'm very happy and content. I've had an awesome life, just not many best friends. Mostly acquaintances. I have been married, now divorced. Of course I've had many other close people die. It's a fact of life. I think me being so young when these particular people passed away just hit me hard. Yes, I have had therapy for years, and it helped greatly. I love my life and enjoy myself with many hobbies and travel. I just don't hang out with a group of people. I really am a loner. I enjoy my own company immensely. I'm not afraid to die. I cherish growing older and looking back on my many experiences. I did have suicidal thoughts from my early teens through my mid-30s, but therapy and the right combo of medication for me through those times. And yes, I do think of my childhood friends that were taken too early fairly often, but I chose to remember the good times and hope that our friendship made their short lives here on earth better. Thank you all for your caring concern. It doesn't sound too traumatic when typed out, but when I was younger we always had debt collectors at the door. Sometimes I'd be home alone, and they'd be pounding at the door and shouting through the letterbox. There were even times they ended up in the house and would start the process of calculating all of our items they were going to take away. This happened throughout a majority of my childhood and teen years. Admittedly it was a lot scarier to me then. However, I'm now 21 and still panic when the door knocks, and I'm not expecting anyone. My mom passing away. It's long but it's the most I've ever shared. She was literally the glue that held my brother, my dad and I together. She was funny, smart, caring, and beautiful. She was the perfect mother. In 2016 my whole family was chasing career and we rarely saw each other. Holidays we acted like we were close for a few hours and we would go back to our corners of life. Then my mom had a stroke. It shook my whole family. She shouldn't have lived, but she did. Doctors told us to make arrangements before they started emergency surgery, but she lives, and it took her months and months of PT before she was released. I spent 8 hours at work and would come to ICU for the night to be with her until my dad or brother showed up in the morning. Rinse repeat, surrounded by people dropping like flies, alarms going off, suits coming in, families crying as I watched my mom with the tube down her throat, not knowing if I would have to speak to the suits that night. She was diagnosed with moyamoya, which in Japanese means a puff of smoke representing the lack of visual blood flow in the brain. A disease that is often diagnosed in children between the ages of 10 to 14 or adults over the age of 40. Formation decent, which my mom was neither. A rise in blood pressure with moyamoya is a death sentence. It should have, but it wasn't. So she recovers. She had to do 2 cerebral bypasses, where they take a vein from your neck and lay it on your brain. Your brain incorporates the vein to give itself a healthy blood flow. We did one side and let herself heal for a few months before attempting the other side. She was then diagnosed with breast cancer. We fell apart. She couldn't get the second bypass because chemo was needed and it would wreck the body to have surgery. While battling cancer, she lost her hair after growing it back due to the cerebral bypass. She was so strong. She beat cancer, had her second bypass, and it was finally over. We went back to our normal lives, as if nothing happened. I went back to work, my brother went back on the road, and my parents bought a house. She couldn't work anymore, so my dad had to work harder. I drank harder, I distanced harder, and isolated myself up until a few years ago, when I went to therapy. Few months ago we all meet up, after she came back from vacation with my dad. She was in mid-conversation when she suffered a massive stroke. We had to go back to that hospital. Her body suffered for almost a week before she passed. I'm not sure how this changes me, but I feel changed. I don't know if some things are better or worse. I just don't know. My parents never asked for a thing their entire lives and the world gave them this. It gave us this and it breaks my heart. The story of that young father in Utah that died while stuck upside down in a cave still haunts me. He crawled down a tight passage thinking it was a different location. It was a dead end. He was completely upside down. Only his ankles were visible. Everyone tried to rescue him, but it was impossible. He died after being in that position for 28 hours. I will never go into a cave, even if it's like made for children. You will never see me in a natural underground structure. I was 0.5 seconds away from drinking my glass of milk, as in, the glass was touching my lips when I looked down and saw a dead spider floating in the milk. It's been 6 years. I still religiously check the glass before and after pouring anything into it. My trust is forever broken. Being made to stand in front of the entire class when I was around 10 to 11 years old while being berated by our class advisor. She accused me of writing a note she allegedly found along the hallway, bad-mouthing and cursing her. I have no idea why she zeroed in on me, considering I have no record of academic delinquencies prior to that, and was a fairly normal student. The experience of 50 students looking at you while an adult is screaming at you, calling you things as if you were the spawn of the devil, is legitimately humiliating. Since then, I've been a loner and tried my very best not to mingle with anyone, so that I wouldn't be caught up in anyone's troubles. I hate my elementary school. It was like a bad omen in my life. When I was 14, my grandmother had a stroke right in front of me. This was back in the day before September 11th. Someone called the operator, requested an ambulance, and gave the address. The operator called us back 5 minutes later and said they couldn't find the address. Phonetically, the names of the street sounded the same, and we had to spell the street name, and they were on the way. FYI, 5 minutes for a stroke is way too long, and the sound of the approaching siren of the ambulance gave me hope, as I had no fucking idea what to do or how to help. I felt so lost and incompetent while this was going on. It was the most helpless feeling in the world. I swore that day that I would never not be ready for an emergency. After high school, I went into EMS, got my EMT, special skills, then paramedic, followed by the fire department. Those skills have made the difference in countless lives. While I have retired from those fields, I still volunteer and keep a BTLS, basic trauma life support, kit in my vehicle just in case. Being disowned and kicked out of my childhood home by my mother a few days after my 18th birthday For years I'd expressed my terror of being abandoned and becoming homeless, and she'd sympathized and reassured she'd always take care of me and love me. As I got older and was pursuing more independence and self-advocacy, she became more hostile. She'd medically neglected me my entire life, and when I turned 18 and found out what Medicaid was, she wasn't having it. Screamed at me in front of my little brother for hours, calling me a selfish little brat and a monster who was tearing the house down from under her feet. Told me to pack my bags and I was leaving tomorrow and never allowed back. My brother and I both left the next morning and are staying with our dad. My brother still visits my mom and I live here full time. But it's not a better situation. My father is an abusive alcoholic and is medically neglectful to both me and himself. I feel like I'm raising both my little brother and my father sometimes. I've gone through a lot of things throughout my life. Diagnosed with CPTSD until later in life when it was confirmed as DID and BPD instead. I'm not fully here most of the time and have no stable sense of self, though I used to be worse. I don't feel like I'm doing well. The situation on my birthday lead me to not indulge in connections with others and I refuse physical contact. I haven't hugged anyone in a few months and now I flinch at being tapped on the shoulder. It's weird because I used to be very touchy. I'm spilling my guts here. I don't know if I'll regret it or not. I don't talk to people about this, and when I do, it never feels right. Nobody gets it, and that's fine for now, because I have whoever I am. So that's one person only to rely on. On a lighter note, I'm 4 months clean of self-harm. This is really small, but one day I was eating lunch out with my aunt. Both my parents are abusive. And I looked up to my aunt so much because she was normal and seemed to like me when we hung out. Anyway, one day we're eating lunch and she hissed, "Stop licking your fingers." When I was like 8, I was mortified, feeling like I had destroyed our relationship. I stopped touching food with my hands. I used forks for pizza, hamburgers, wings, everything. It took 20 years to get over it. I mentioned it to her last year and she laughed and said, "I don't remember that, but I believe you." She works on an ambulance and claims that her coworker used to lick his fingers during lunch after helping out patients without washing his hands, and it's bugged her ever since. I lost everything but my car in a house fire in 2014. I became an accidental minimalist / anti-consumptionist because I pretty much stopped buying things I didn't need and didn't replace the vast majority of what I lost. A really good friend and just one of the most genuine guys I rode street bike with all the time called me one day. I was busy with work, so it went to voicemail. He was catching up with me on the voicemail and asked if I wanted to go out for a ride. His bike slid out on loose gravel entering the freeway and he got into a fatal accident with a semi-truck. This was 6 years ago and I still think about what if I picked up that phone call. Just a 15-second phone call. I'll tell you, I rarely miss calls from friends and family now, and if I do I'm quick to call back. I really appreciate the seconds of every day now, because at the end of the day they all add up. I used to play RuneScape when I was around 10 to 13, and I downloaded multiple fake cheats. They were all malware and keyleggers. My parents later typed in their bank information unknowing of the viruses. Hackers stole all their life savings and ruined them financially, at least $100,000, and they never recovered it. Impossible not to blame myself. Even to this day, nearly 12 years later, I still wish I had been smarter and not downloaded those fake cheats. My 3 brothers' lives changed that day. My parents' lives changed. My life changed from what it could have and should have been, all because of my actions. We took a family trip to Carlsbad Caverns about 10 years ago. Once you get to the bottom, you can either walk back up or take an sketchy elevator. Family wanted to take the elevator, so we did. Someone told the operator how scared I get, and he said I hope it doesn't break down like it normally does as a joke. Then he made the elevator stop again, as a joke. I didn't think it was funny, especially when we actually couldn't get it going again. I started to panic. My sisters and my wife were trying to comfort me, but I started hyperventilating, and my whole body started to tremble. I think I was about to pass out. The elevator started going again, and when we got to the top the operator wasn't such a jokester anymore. He was shaking and apologizing profusely. When we go to Las Vegas, I try to get a room on the first floor of whatever hotel, or I'll ask security for special privileges for the stairs, and I'll gladly use stairs, whether I'm on the second floor or the 20th floor. Sometimes neither is an option. Then others on the elevator, get a fun show and get to watch me panic. The first girl I had a crush on died over 7 years ago. We met through mutual friends. Went on some type of double date which basically consisted of me, a friend and her cousin staying the night at her place. I was just so attracted to her I couldn't believe she would be into me until she was sitting on my lap making out with me. Things got a little messy afterwards. We did meet on /off a few times. Then she broke it off because of some rumors she heard about me. Still no clue what she was on about, though I failed to address it properly. Got back in touch 6 months later, and we started getting closer again. Then dead silence. 3 years later I went to the hospital in my hometown because of a back injury. I met her there by accident, bound to a wheelchair and completely drained. Couldn't have waited more than 40 kgs, most likely less. We had one final, short and awkward conversation. Then she was brought back to her room by a nurse. A week later she was dead. So many things left unsaid. So many wasted opportunities of happiness and the overbearing feeling that life was just so fragile. It could all be over so quickly. After that, I decided to live with no regrets. 7.5 years later, and I tried to make the best out of everything and leave no stone unturned. I might not have been perfect, but I'm quite happy with how things turned out. In any case, rest in peace, Linda. 1992, 2014. I hope you are in a better place now. You sure deserve it.